The flight attendant's eyes narrowed as she approached the man in simple jeans and a faded t-shirt. "Where's your seat?" she asked, her tone sharp. "First class." She snatched his boarding pass and studied it like it was a threat. With a sudden move, she slapped him across the face. The room went silent. What she didn't know was that this man dressed in casual clothes was the CEO of the airline. Her actions would spark a chain of events no one could have imagined. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. The rain hammered against the terminal windows of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport that gray Monday morning, each drop a staccato beat against the glass. Inside Gate 17, Marcus Henderson stood near the boarding queue, his worn Nike sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. He adjusted the strap of his leather briefcase, battered, the kind you'd find at a thrift store, not the sleek leather portfolios carried by the other first-class passengers gathering nearby. At 52 years old, Marcus had spent the past 4 years running American Airlines from behind closed doors, deliberately anonymous, intentionally invisible. His photo had never appeared on the company website, never hung in break rooms, never been distributed in internal communications. Most employees knew his name from policy memos and quarterly reports, but they wouldn't recognize him if he sat next to them on a flight. That anonymity had been strategic. Marcus believed leaders should be judged by their decisions, not their appearance. But in the past 6 months, something had been nagging at him. The numbers didn't add up. Customer satisfaction surveys showed high marks overall, but when broken down by demographic, a pattern emerged. Passengers of color consistently rated their experiences lower. Not dramatically, just 2 or 3 points on a 10-point scale, but consistently enough that it couldn't be coincidence. Complaint resolution times showed similar disparities. White passengers who filed complaints received responses within 48 hours. Everyone else waited an average of 9 days. And then there were the settlement payments. American Airlines had paid out over $40 million in discrimination settlements in the past 5 years, each one quietly resolved with non-disclosure agreements that kept the incidents out of public view. Marcus had brought these numbers to his executive team 3 months ago. They dismissed his concerns. Standard industry variance, the COO had said. You can't read too much into demographic data, legal had advised. Our processes are colorblind, HR had insisted. But Marcus couldn't let it go. If systematic discrimination existed in his company, he needed to see it firsthand, not through reports or surveys, but through lived experience. So today, for the first time in his 4-year tenure as CEO, Marcus Henderson was conducting a field audit. Dressed in torn jeans, a Target t-shirt, and scuffed sneakers. Flying first class on his own airline to see how crew members treated passengers they deemed unworthy of premium service. He'd told no one except his assistant Sarah, who'd booked the ticket under his name but flagged it as confidential in the system. No special notes, no VIP designation, just a regular booking that happened to belong to the CEO. The Patek Philippe on his wrist was the only expensive thing visible on him, a deliberate choice. Would anyone notice the $73,000 watch and ask questions, or would they see the jeans and sneakers and decide they already knew everything about him? First-class passengers, we now welcome you to board Flight 447 to New York LaGuardia. Marcus moved forward with the small cluster of first-class travelers. A white woman in her 60s, dripping in diamonds, gave him a long look as he stepped into line behind her. Her eyes traveled from his shoes up to his face and her mouth tightened. She clutched her Hermes bag a little closer to her body. The gate agent barely glanced at Marcus's boarding pass before waving him through. Marcus made a mental note, no scrutiny here, but that didn't mean anything yet. He walked down the jet bridge alone, his heart beating faster than usual. This was real now. Not numbers on a spreadsheet or complaints in a file. This was him about to experience firsthand whether his company treated all passengers with equal dignity. The aircraft door loomed ahead. A flight attendant stood there, blonde hair pulled back tight. Her name tag read Brenda Collins. Marcus recognized the name immediately. Brenda Collins appeared in multiple complaint files he'd reviewed over the past few months. 17 separate incidents. All involving passengers of color. All dismissed after minimal investigation, but she didn't know who he was, and that was exactly the point. Brenda's smile was warm and genuine for the couple ahead of Marcus, until her eyes landed on him. The smile vanished instantly. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "Where's your seat?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. It was starting already. 2A, first class. Her tone dripped with disbelief. "Yes." She held out her hand, fingers snapping. "Let me see your boarding pass." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the digital pass. Brenda leaned in close, studying it with narrowed eyes like she was examining evidence of fraud. "This doesn't look right," she said finally, loud enough for the couple ahead to turn around and look. "It's a standard electronic boarding pass from the American Airlines app." Marcus replied calmly. "The barcode looks off." Brenda was already pulling out her scanner. "I need to verify this." The scanner beeped, green light, valid ticket, seat 2A, first class, but Brenda didn't hand back his phone. Instead she called down the jet bridge. "Diana, can you come up here for a second?" A younger flight attendant appeared, her expression uncertain. "What's wrong?" "I need you to look at this boarding pass. Does it seem legitimate to you?" Diana glanced at Marcus's phone, then at Marcus, then back at Brenda with clear confusion. "It scanned fine, didn't it? Just look at it." Brenda insisted. Marcus watched this performance with practiced patience. His anonymity was his greatest weapon today. It let him see the truth that reports and surveys could never capture: the casual cruelty, the automatic assumptions, the discrimination hiding behind procedure and policy. Diana was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Brenda, I really think go get Captain Morrison." Brenda cut her off. "Tell him we have a situation." The word situations hung in the air like a threat. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, not fear but anticipation. Here it was, the moment that would reveal the truth, the moment that would change everything. He walked into the first-class cabin and sat down in seat 2A. The cabin was filling slowly with the usual first-class crowd. Business suits, designer handbags, the confident posture of people accustomed to premium service and premium spaces. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit took seat 3A across the aisle. He glanced at Marcus, and his face twisted slightly, not quite disgust but close. The look said, "What are you doing here?" Marcus pulled out his phone and, without making it obvious, started recording. The camera was angled to capture the aisle, the crew, everything that was about to unfold. Brenda appeared at his row, her face flushed. "Sir, I need you to step off the aircraft while we verify your ticket." "You already verified it. It scanned correctly." "I need to do a manual verification through the gate system, then do it while I sit here." "I'm not leaving my seat." Several passengers were watching now. The businessman across the aisle shook his head in disgust. A woman in seat 1B started recording on her phone, not to document injustice, Marcus noted, but to capture what she clearly assumed was fraud. Marcus's heart was pounding, but his voice stayed level. "Ma'am, I've shown you my boarding pass. It's valid. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. What specifically is the problem?" "The problem," Brenda said, her voice rising, "is that I have the right to verify any passenger's ticket when I have reasonable suspicion of fraud." Reasonable suspicion based on what? The question hung between them. Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. She couldn't say it. Couldn't admit that her only suspicion was based on his appearance, his clothes, his skin. "Based on my professional judgment," she said finally. "Your professional judgment," Marcus repeated softly. "And did you use that same professional judgment with the white passengers who boarded before me?" Brenda's face went bright red. "How dare you make this about race? I treat everyone equally." "Then why am I the only one whose ticket you've questioned?" "Because you." Brenda stopped herself, but the damage was done. The sentence hung unfinished in the air, filled with all the ugly assumptions she couldn't quite bring herself to voice. Captain Robert Morrison appeared from the cockpit. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention. He took one look at the scene. Brenda standing over Marcus, passengers watching, phones recording, and his face hardened. "What's going on here?" Morrison's voice carried authority, the absolute certainty of someone used to being obeyed. "Captain, this passenger has a suspicious boarding pass," Brenda said quickly. "I requested he step off the aircraft for verification, and he refused to comply with crew instructions." Morrison's eyes swept over Marcus, the torn jeans, the cheap t-shirt, the scuffed sneakers. Marcus watched the captain's face as judgment formed in real time, guilty until proven innocent, based on nothing but appearance. "Sir," Morrison said, his voice cold, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass and a government-issued photo ID immediately." "She already scanned my boarding pass. It's valid. ID." Now Marcus reached into his messenger bag slowly. As he did, something metallic caught the overhead light, the corner of his CEO badge lanyard, visible for just a moment before he deliberately moved past it to his wallet. Not yet. The revelation had to come at exactly the right moment, when the discrimination was so blatant that even the most skeptical observer couldn't deny it. He pulled out his driver's license and handed it to Morrison. The captain examined it with theatrical thoroughness, holding it up to the light, looking back and forth between the photo and Marcus's face, performing verification like he was checking a $50 bill for forgery. "Texas license," Morrison said, as if this was somehow suspicious. "I live in Dallas." "We're in Dallas, and you purchased this ticket when?" 2 weeks ago through the American Airlines website." "Payment method?" "Personal credit card." "Which card?" Morrison leaned forward slightly and Marcus recognized the trap. This was the question designed to catch him in a lie. "American Express Centurion." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "The Centurion card, invitation only, $10,000 annual fee, reserved for the wealthiest elite. You expect me to believe that someone dressed like you has a Centurion card?" Several passengers laughed. The absurdity was apparent to them. "Look at him, look at his clothes, obviously lying." The businessman in 3A spoke up, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is exactly why we can't have nice things anymore. People gaming the system, buying cheap tickets and trying to scam their way into first class." A woman in seat 4C nodded vigorously. "I paid full price for my seat. It's not fair that people like him think they can just—" She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. The meaning was crystal clear. "Show me the card," Morrison demanded. The word landed like a stone. The cabin went quiet. "Excuse me," Morrison's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I said no. I've shown you my boarding pass, which scanned correctly. I've shown you my government ID, which you verified. I don't have to show you my credit card to sit in a seat I've paid for." Marcus kept his voice calm, but there was steel underneath. "You have no legal right to demand that information." Morrison's jaw clenched. He pulled out his radio. "Ground control, this is Flight 447. I need security to Gate 17 immediately." Uncooperative passenger refusing to follow crew instructions. Brenda stepped closer, emboldened by the captain's support. Her voice took on a theatrical quality, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. "Sir, if you don't cooperate right now, you will be removed from this aircraft and potentially arrested for interfering with flight operations." "I haven't interfered with anything," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sitting in my assigned seat." "That's the opposite of interfering." "Your attitude says otherwise," Morrison interjected. "Real first-class passengers don't argue with crew members. They understand that we're here for everyone's safety and security." There it was. The real issue laid bare. Not fraud, not safety, not procedure, attitude, not knowing your place, not performing enough submission to white authority. Marcus's phone buzzed in his bag. He could see the screen lighting up through the leather, probably the board of directors wanting to confirm tomorrow's meeting. He let it ring. Everything that happened next needed to unfold without interference. 3 security officers arrived at the aircraft door. The lead officer, a muscular man whose name tag read Derek Hayes, surveyed the scene with professional neutrality. "What's the situation?" Hayes asked Morrison. "Suspected ticket fraud," the captain replied smoothly. Passenger refused to provide full verification when questioned, became hostile and argumentative, possibly intoxicated or under the influence based on his erratic behavior. Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. He hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't made a single threatening gesture, but Morrison was building a narrative, constructing a story that would justify whatever came next. "Sir," Officer Hayes addressed Marcus, his voice firm but not aggressive, "I need you to gather your belongings and come with us. We can sort this out at the gate." "Officer, I've committed no crime. My boarding pass is legitimate. My identification has been verified. I'm sitting in my assigned seat." The only issue here is that these crew members have decided, based solely on my appearance, that I don't belong in first class." "He's lying." Brenda's voice rose to a near shriek. "He's trying to manipulate you. His ticket is obviously fraudulent. Just look at him. Does he look like someone who can afford a first-class ticket?" And there it was, finally. The truth stripped of all pretense. Officer Hayes's expression shifted slightly. He was trained to spot discrimination, and Brenda had just made it impossible to miss. He turned to the other passengers. "Did anyone witness any threatening or disruptive behavior from this passenger?" Silence. Long, heavy, damning silence. The woman recording on her phone looked down. The businessman suddenly found his newspaper fascinating. The passengers who'd been nodding along with Brenda's assessment now avoided eye contact. Only one person spoke up, an elderly black man in seat 5A who Marcus hadn't even noticed. "I've been watching since I boarded," the man said, his voice quiet but clear. "That man hasn't done nothing but sit in his seat and answer questions politely. Everything else is coming from them." Brenda whirled on him. "Stay out of this. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone on this plane," the man replied. "Because what you're doing to him, you could do to any of us." Morrison's radio crackled. A woman's voice tight with stress. "Captain Morrison, this is Patricia Walsh from Regional Management. I'm getting multiple calls about a situation on 447. What's your status?" "Under control, Patricia," Morrison replied. "Standard fraud situation. Passenger refusing to cooperate. Security is handling removal now." Marcus felt something shift inside him. This was the moment. The perfect crystallization of everything wrong with the system. The discrimination. The abuse of authority. The way procedure became a weapon against certain bodies while protecting others. He reached for his messenger bag. "Don't let him near that bag," Brenda shouted. "He could have a weapon." Officer Hayes held up a hand. "Ma'am, please calm down." "Sir, I need you to very slowly show me what's in your bag." "I'm just reaching for documents," Marcus said calmly. "Documentation that I think will resolve this situation." But before he could retrieve anything, Brenda moved, fast. Her hand lashed out and grabbed the messenger bag from his lap, yanking it away from him. "I said don't touch your bag," she screamed. "Ma'am, you can't do that," Officer Hayes started. Brenda wasn't listening. She dumped the contents of Marcus's bag onto the floor. Papers scattered. His iPad clattered against the seat. Business cards spilled across the aisle. And then her hand was moving again, faster than anyone could react. The slap cracked through the cabin like a gunshot. Marcus's head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across his cheek. His ears rang. For a moment the world tilted sideways. "That's what thieves get," Brenda shouted, her voice breaking. "Animals like you don't belong in first class." The cabin went completely silent. Even the passengers who'd been supporting Brenda looked shocked now. Physical assault crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Brenda grabbed Marcus's boarding pass from where it sat on his tray table. She ripped it violently. Once, twice, 3 times. Tearing it into smaller and smaller pieces with shaking hands, her face twisted with rage and something else, fear, maybe. The fear of being wrong. The fear of consequences. The fear driving her to double down, to commit fully, to prove she was right by escalating beyond any reasonable response. She threw the torn paper at Marcus's feet. "Pick up your fake ticket and get off this plane. Get on your knees and crawl back where you belong." Marcus touched his cheek. His hand came away clean. No blood, just the burning sensation of injured skin and injured dignity. Officer Hayes moved forward immediately, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to anger. "Ma'am, you just assaulted a passenger. I need you to step back right now." "I was defending myself," Brenda insisted. He was reaching for his bag. He could have had a weapon. "I had every right." "You had no right to strike him," Hayes cut her off. He turned to Marcus. "Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," Marcus said quietly. "But I want to press charges for assault." Morrison's radio erupted with Patricia Walsh's voice no longer calm. "Captain Morrison, I just got a call from corporate headquarters. The passenger you're trying to remove, do not remove him. I repeat, do not remove that passenger. His name is—" But Marcus was already reaching into his jacket pocket, not the messenger bag on the floor. The inner pocket of his cheap jacket, where he'd kept the documents Brenda hadn't dumped out. He pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it with deliberate care. The first document was his laminated CEO identification badge, American Airlines logo embossed in gold, his photo, his name, his title in bold letters, Marcus Henderson, Chief Executive Officer, American Airlines. Officer Hayes leaned forward to read it. His face went pale. "Oh my God." Marcus pulled out the second document, his official appointment letter from the Board of Directors, dated January 15, 2021, signed by Chairman James Richardson, official corporate seal embossed in gold leaf, then his stock ownership certificate, 12% equity stake in American Airlines, second largest individual shareholder after the founding family trust, then his business cards, his company email on official letterhead, his direct office line to the executive suite on the 47th floor of headquarters, document after document, proof after proof, undeniable, irrefutable, devastating. "My name is Marcus Henderson," he said clearly, his voice carrying through the silent cabin. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of American Airlines. Today was my first undercover audit to verify what the data has been telling me, that discrimination exists systematically in our operations." He looked directly at Brenda, whose face had gone from red to gray, the color draining out in real time. "And I found it." The silence that followed was absolute, complete, suffocating. Brenda's legs gave out. She collapsed into an empty seat, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. She'd just slapped the CEO, called him an animal, told him to crawl, destroyed his property, assaulted him, on camera, with dozens of witnesses. Morrison's radio fell from his trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. The confident authority had evaporated, replaced by pure terror. Captain Morrison's mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish drowning in air. The passengers sat frozen, their phones still recording, capturing every second of the revelation. The live stream that the woman in 1B had started now had over 15,000 viewers, all watching the moment when power revealed itself and consequences became inevitable. Marcus's phone rang. He picked it up and answered on speaker, his voice steady despite the red handprint still visible on his cheek. "Marcus, this is James Richardson." The chairman's voice carried through the quiet aircraft. "The entire board is watching a live stream of your flight. Are you safe?" "I'm physically fine, James, but I've just been physically assaulted by a senior flight attendant, verbally abused with racial slurs, and nearly arrested for the crime of sitting in a seat I paid for while black. The board is calling an emergency session within the hour. Marcus, we're devastated, appalled. Whatever you need, whatever changes you want to implement, you have full authority and full support. Thank you, James. I'll call you back in 15 minutes with my requirements." Marcus ended the call. The cabin remained silent, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. He turned to Brenda, who was crying now, not tears of remorse, but tears of absolute terror as her world collapsed around her. "Mrs. Collins," Marcus said quietly, "over the past few months, I've been reviewing complaint files. Your name appears in 17 separate incidents, questioning tickets based on appearance, making discriminatory comments. You've had 14 formal complaints filed against you. All of them were dismissed after minimal investigation. All of them came from passengers of color." Brenda's sobs grew louder, but Marcus continued, his voice never rising. "There's testimony from a Muslim passenger you refused to serve during Ramadan. A Hispanic family you tried to remove because their children were speaking Spanish. An elderly Sikh gentleman you called a terrorist within earshot of other passengers. A young black woman you accused of stealing headphones that were her own property." Each revelation landed like a physical blow. The passengers watched in horror. The live stream viewer count climbed past 30,000. Marcus turned to Morrison. "Captain, you have 16 discrimination complaints in your personnel file. 16. All dismissed, all explained away as misunderstandings. The pattern is there. The documentation exists. And today you've added one more incident to your record." Morrison tried to speak but no words came out. "And you," Marcus looked at the businessman in seat 3A, "you laughed when she called me a liar. You assumed I was committing fraud based on nothing but my appearance. You're the CFO of Patterson Industries, according to your ticket. Your company does $20 million in business with American Airlines annually. Consider that contract under review. The man's face went white. Marcus addressed the cabin at large, speaking to the passengers and the recording phones and the 40,000 viewers now watching worldwide. What you witnessed today is not an isolated incident. It's not a few bad employees. It's systematic, it's cultural. It's what happens when discrimination gets dressed up in policy language and called security or standards or proper procedure. His phone showed breaking news alerts already appearing. American Airlines CEO assaulted during discrimination audit. Stock price drops 8% in minutes. DOT opens investigation into airline discrimination. But this is also the moment when everything changes, Marcus continued. Not just for American Airlines, but for the entire industry. Because what happened here today, the assault, the slurs, the assumption that I didn't belong, is going to become the catalyst for the most comprehensive civil rights reform in modern aviation history. He pulled out his phone and made a call on speaker. Sarah, I need you to prepare emergency documentation. Henderson protocols, full implementation, effective immediately. No, I don't care what legal says about the cost. Yes, board approval is guaranteed. Get it done. Marcus ended the call and looked at Officer Hayes. I want to press full criminal charges against Brenda Collins for assault. I also want an immediate investigation launched into Captain Morrison and this entire crew for civil rights violations. Hayes nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I'll need to call my supervisor and the airport police. Make the calls. As Hayes stepped away, Marcus turned back to Brenda. She was hunched in the seat, her body racked with sobs, her career and livelihood evaporating in real time. I have children, she choked out. I have a mortgage, my daughter starts college next year. Please, Mr. Henderson, I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. I'm not a bad person, I'm not racist, you just assumed that someone who looked like me couldn't possibly belong in first class. Marcus finished quietly. You just decided that my skin color and my clothes told you everything you needed to know about my worth as a human being. You just thought you had the right to put your hands on me because you decided I was less than. I'm sorry, Brenda whispered. I'm so sorry. You're sorry you got caught, Marcus replied. You're sorry there are consequences, but you're not sorry for what you did, because if I'd been who you thought I was, just some random black man without power or platform, you'd feel completely justified right now. You'd be telling yourself you were protecting the airline, maintaining standards, doing your job. The truth of his words hung in the air. Brenda couldn't deny it because they both knew it was true. Morrison finally found his voice. Mr. Henderson, I take full responsibility for the behavior of my crew. I should have intervened sooner. I should have recognized, you should have treated me like a human being from the start. Marcus cut him off, you should have done that regardless of who I was. That's the point, Captain. Basic human dignity shouldn't require a CEO badge and a stock portfolio. Deanna, the younger flight attendant who'd tried to question Brenda's actions, stepped forward hesitantly. Her face was wet with tears. Mr. Henderson, I'm so sorry, I should have done more. I should have stopped her. I've seen her do things like this before, and I never said anything because I was afraid of retaliation, and that's no excuse, and I'm so ashamed. What's your name? Marcus asked gently. Deanna. Deanna Park. How long have you worked for American Airlines, Diana? 3 years. Have you witnessed discrimination before? Deanna nodded miserably. Yes, sir, multiple times. I filed 2 reports, and both times I was told I was being overly sensitive. The second time I was written up for creating conflict and not supporting team cohesion. After that I stopped reporting because I needed this job and I couldn't afford to lose it. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a note. Deanna, after today that changes. You're going to be part of the solution. Airport police arrived, along with Patricia Walsh from regional management and 2 executives from corporate headquarters who'd apparently broken every speed limit to get there. The next hour was a blur of statements and documentation and video evidence reviewed frame by frame. Brenda was led off the aircraft in handcuffs, still crying. Captain Morrison was suspended pending investigation. The passengers were deplaned and rebooked on other flights. And Marcus Henderson, CEO of American Airlines, sat in seat 2A with a red handprint on his face and documented proof of systematic discrimination that would transform an entire industry. Later that day, after the aircraft was cleared, Marcus sat alone in first class while airport police documented everything. Officers took statements. Photographers captured evidence. The red handprint on his cheek was measured and recorded. Patricia Walsh from regional management arrived, her face pale with horror. "Mr. Henderson, I am so deeply sorry, the entire regional team is devastated. If there's anything, there is," Marcus cut her off. "I want every discrimination complaint filed in the Dallas region for the past 5 years on my desk by tomorrow morning. Every single one. I want to know how many were investigated, how many were dismissed, how many resulted in discipline." "Yes, sir. Absolutely. And Patricia, I want honest numbers, not sanitized, not explained away. Raw data with full context." She nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she took notes. Marcus's phone had been ringing continuously. He finally answered when he saw it was James Richardson, chairman of the board. "Marcus, my God, are you all right?" "Physically, yes, but James, we have a massive problem. What happened to me today isn't an isolated incident. My suspicions were correct. It's systematic, it's cultural, and we need to tear this company apart and rebuild it if we're going to fix it. You have full board support, whatever you need. I need authorization for a complete operational audit. Every department, every region, every crew. I need access to complaint files that legal has been sitting on. I need the authority to suspend anyone pending investigation, regardless of seniority or position." "Done. I'll have the authorization letter to you within the hour." Marcus hung up and stared at his reflection in the aircraft window. The red mark on his cheek was already darkening to purple. By tomorrow it would be a full bruise, visible evidence of what happened when prejudice met power and assumed it was powerless. But this wasn't about revenge, this was about truth. About finally seeing his company as it really was, not as reports and surveys suggested it might be. The numbers had told him something was wrong, today had confirmed it. Now came the hard part, fixing it. 2 weeks later, Marcus sat in his office surrounded by bankers' boxes. 2 weeks of 16-hour days reviewing complaint files. 2 weeks of reading stories that made his stomach turn and his hands shake with anger. Sarah brought him another box. "That's the last one from the Dallas region. Legal wants to know when you'll be ready to discuss settlement strategies." "Tell legal we're not settling anything until we understand the full scope," Marcus said without looking up. "And tell them I want the National Complaint Database unlocked, all regions. All years we have records for." "Sir, they're saying that's protected by attorney-client privilege. I'm the client. They work for me. Get me those files, or get me new lawyers." Sarah nodded and left. Marcus returned to the file in front of him. Complaint number 4847, March 2024. Passenger name, Jennifer Washington. Flight, AA 1893. Phoenix to Miami. Summary. Black female passenger seated in first class was asked to show her boarding pass 3 times by the same flight attendant. When passenger asked why she was being singled out, flight attendant called security. Passenger was removed from aircraft and missed flight. Resolution: flight attendant counseled on proper procedure. No disciplinary action. Passenger given $200 voucher as goodwill gesture. Marcus set down the file and pulled up Jennifer Washington's customer record. She'd been a gold status frequent flyer. After the incident, she'd never flown American Airlines again. He made a note: contact Jennifer Washington. Personal apology, full refund plus compensation. Offer position on oversight committee if willing. The next file was worse. Complaint number 5234, July 2024. Passenger name, Ahmed Hassan. Flight, AA 2156, Boston to Dallas. Summary. Muslim passenger asked to deboard for additional security screening after another passenger expressed discomfort with his presence. Passenger missed flight, an important business meeting. Resolution: security protocols followed correctly. No fault found. Passenger complaint dismissed. Marcus felt sick. He pulled up the full incident report, which included the other passenger's statement. He was praying in Arabic. It made me nervous. Ahmed Hassan had been praying quietly in his seat, not bothering anyone, not threatening anyone, just practicing his religion. And he'd been removed from the aircraft because someone's prejudice made them uncomfortable. Note: contact Ahmed Hassan. Full apology. Review security protocols with DOT. Crew involved needs retraining minimum. Haul after file. Box after box. The pattern was undeniable. Jamal Thompson, removed from first class because a white passenger complained he was taking up too much space. Maria Rodriguez, accused of theft when she put on her own headphones that she'd brought from home. David Park, questioned about his citizenship status despite having a U.S. passport. Fatima Al-Said, told to remove her hijab for security purposes, even though TSA had already cleared her. Marcus kept counting. By the end of the second week, he had documented over 2,000 complaints in 5 years from the Dallas region alone. 2,000 incidents of systematic discrimination hidden behind sanitized language like security protocols and passenger comfort and crew discretion. And Marcus had been CEO for 4 of those years. This had been happening under his watch. While he'd been in meetings and reviewing quarterly earnings and approving strategic plans, his employees had been traumatizing passengers on a daily basis. He pushed away from his desk and walked to the window. Dallas sprawled below him, 47 floors down. From up here, everything looked orderly, clean, functional. But down there in the streets, in the airport gates, in the aircraft cabins, his company was causing real harm to real people. His phone buzzed. Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, Dr. Veronica Hayes is here for her interview." Marcus had spent the past week interviewing candidates for a new position, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, reporting directly to him with full executive authority. He'd interviewed 7 candidates so far. All of them had been impressive on paper. All of them had said the right things about diversity and inclusion and equity. But none of them had challenged him. None of them had questioned the company's commitment. None of them had pushed back. "Send her in." Dr. Veronica Hayes entered his office with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and no interest in performing deference. She was in her late 40s, black with natural hair styled in locks and an expression that suggested she could see through corporate bullshit from a mile away. She looked at the banker's boxes stacked around his office. "Reading some light material, Mr. Henderson. 5 years of complaint files from one region. Over 2,000 documented incidents of discrimination. That's just what was reported from Dallas. God knows how many incidents weren't reported and how bad the numbers are nationally." Dr. Hayes sat down without being invited and pulled one of the files toward her. She read silently for a moment, then looked up. "You invited me here to interview for Chief Diversity Officer. But before we talk about my qualifications, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead. Do you actually want change, or do you want the appearance of change? Because I've consulted for a dozen Fortune 500 companies, and most of them hire someone like me to check a box and issue reports that get filed away. They want to look progressive without actually doing the hard, expensive, uncomfortable work of transformation. Which are you?" Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Finally, someone willing to be honest. 2 weeks ago, I was physically assaulted on one of my own flights because a crew member decided I didn't belong in first class based on how I looked. That assault was the result of a culture I've been leading for 4 years without fully understanding what was happening on the ground. So to answer your question, I want real change, even if it's hard, even if it's expensive, even if it costs me executives who resign rather than do the work. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. "Then here's what you need to know. Your diversity problem isn't just frontline employees, it's leadership. It's systems. It's the fact that you have 47 floors between you and the people experiencing discrimination. It's policies that sound neutral but have discriminatory effects. It's training programs that check boxes without changing behavior." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "Do you?" "Because fixing this means overhauling everything. hiring practices, promotion criteria, complaint procedures, training programs, performance metrics. You'll face resistance from executives who think you're overreacting, from employees who think you're being too political, from shareholders who worry about costs, from customers who complain that you're focused on woke politics instead of running an airline. I understand. And it means uncomfortable truths about yourself, Dr. Hayes continued. About how you've benefited from privilege even while experiencing discrimination. About how you made it to CEO while these problems festered under your leadership. About how your anonymity, which you thought was about humility, actually insulated you from seeing what your employees and passengers face every day. Marcus felt that truth land like a punch. She was right. His decision to stay anonymous hadn't been purely about being judged on merit. It had also been about comfort. About not having to confront these issues directly. About being able to lead from the safety of his office while others dealt with the messy reality on the ground. When can you start? He asked. Dr. Hayes smiled slightly. You're offering me the position. You're the first person who's been honest with me. The first person who's challenged me instead of trying to impress me. That's what I need. Then I start Monday. And Mr. Henderson, that executive team you mentioned, we're starting there. I want to audit every C-suite leader's track record on diversity. I want to review their hiring decisions, their promotion recommendations, their complaint resolutions. If any of them have been part of the problem, they go. I don't care how valuable they think they are. Agreed. And you, Dr. Hayes said, standing. You're going to make yourself visible. No more anonymity. Your face needs to be everywhere. Website, break rooms, training videos. Employees need to see that the person demanding change looks like you. That representation matters. That leadership is diverse. Can you do that? Marcus thought about his preference for privacy. His comfort with anonymity. Then he thought about Jennifer Washington and Ahmed Hassan and Jamal Thompson and all the other passengers who hadn't had the luxury of hiding.
Yes.
I can do that. 1 month after the incident, Marcus called an emergency meeting of his entire executive team. 12 senior leaders gathered in the conference room, confused about the sudden summons. Marcus stood at the head of the table with Dr. Hayes beside him. He'd spent the past month reviewing not just complaint files, but his executives' roles in handling or mishandling those complaints. I'm going to say something that some of you won't like. Marcus began. Our company has a systematic discrimination problem. Not a few bad employees. Not isolated incidents. A systematic cultural problem that starts at this table. Richard Castellano, the COO who dismissed Marcus's concerns 3 months ago, shifted uncomfortably. Marcus, we've been over this. The data is being misinterpreted. The data, Marcus interrupted, shows that you personally reviewed and dismissed 43 discrimination complaints over the past 2 years. 43 passengers filed formal complaints about being profiled, harassed or mistreated. And in 43 cases, you found no wrongdoing. Castellano's face flushed. I followed protocol. Each case was investigated according to company policy. Company policy written by legal to minimize liability, not to address discrimination. Dr. Hayes interjected. Policy that prioritizes protecting employees over protecting passengers. Policy that treats discrimination complaints as PR problems rather than civil rights violations. Marcus clicked to a presentation on the screen. Here's what we found. Richard, you dismissed a complaint from a black passenger who was told to give up her first-class seat to accommodate a white passenger who wanted to sit with their companion. You classified it as operational necessity. It was operational. The white passenger wasn't asked. Only the black passenger. That's textbook discrimination. Marcus advanced to the next slide. Jennifer, you're head of HR. You received a complaint from 3 flight attendants of color who reported that crew scheduling consistently gave them less desirable routes than their white counterparts with equal seniority. You closed the investigation after interviewing the scheduler, who said route assignment was based on operational needs. Jennifer Morris, the HR director, opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus continued. Dr. Hayes reviewed the scheduling data. Turns out operational needs meant that white flight attendants got domestic routes with better pay and schedules, while flight attendants of color got overnight international routes with worse compensation. The pattern was statistically impossible to explain as coincidence. The room had gone completely silent. David, Marcus turned to the general counsel. You've settled 27 discrimination cases in the past 3 years. All with NDAs. All quietly buried. You never once brought these patterns to my attention or recommended systematic changes. David Chen, the general counsel, straightened in his seat. Those settlements protected the company from costly litigation. That's my job. Your job, Dr. Hayes said sharply, is to ensure this company operates within the law. The Civil Rights Act doesn't disappear because you pay people to be quiet about violations. Marcus looked around the table at faces he'd trusted, leaders he'd promoted, executives who'd helped build this company, and he saw their complicity, their comfort with the status quo, their willingness to protect the institution at the expense of human dignity. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said. First, we're implementing the Henderson protocols named after the flight where I was assaulted. Body cameras for all crew members. Independent oversight committee for complaints. Mandatory bias training designed by Dr. Hayes' team. Real consequences for discriminatory behavior. Second, we're revisiting every discrimination complaint filed in the past 5 years. Every single one. We're reaching out to passengers, apologizing and offering real compensation, not vouchers. Real money. Third, we're auditing every department, every process, every policy to identify and eliminate practices that enable discrimination. Richard Castellano stood up. Marcus, this is going to cost hundreds of millions. The board will never approve. The board already approved it, Marcus said quietly. James Richardson signed off yesterday. We have full authority and full funding. Then I resign, Castellano said. I've given this company 20 years, and I won't stay to watch you destroy it with this politically correct witch hunt. Your resignation is accepted, Marcus replied without hesitation. Anyone else? 2 other executives stood, both senior vice presidents who'd been with the company for over a decade, both men who'd presided over regions with the highest complaint rates. This is insane, one of them said. You're going to tear this company apart over a few complaints from oversensitive passengers who don't understand how the airline industry works. Dr. Hayes laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Oversensitive, there it is, the word that's been used to dismiss discrimination for generations. Tell me, when a white passenger complains about a delayed flight, are they being oversensitive? When a white passenger asks for better service, are they being entitled? The executive's face went red, but he had no answer. Thank you for your service to this company, Marcus said. HR will process your resignations by end of day. The rest of you have a choice. Get on board with these changes, actively support them, and help build something better, or leave. But there's no middle ground, no passive resistance, no quiet sabotage. You're either part of the solution or you're gone. The room remained silent for a long moment. Then Sarah Kim, the CFO, spoke up. What do you need from those of us who stay? Honesty, Marcus said. When you see discrimination, call it out. When policies have disparate impact, flag it. When training falls short, demand better. And most importantly, be willing to examine your own biases and blind spots. I can do that, Sarah said. Several others nodded in agreement. Good, then let's get to work. The resistance hit harder than Marcus had anticipated. The Henderson protocols had been announced publicly with full transparency about what had happened on Flight 447. The video of Marcus being assaulted had gone viral. News coverage had been extensive, mostly sympathetic, but there was significant backlash. Conservative media accused Marcus of weaponizing his experience and promoting a woke agenda. Right-wing pundits claimed the protocols were reverse discrimination against white employees. Social media was flooded with calls to boycott American Airlines. More concerning was the internal resistance. Flight attendants' unions filed grievances about body cameras, claiming they violated privacy rights. Pilots' unions complained that bias training was political indoctrination. Several regional managers quietly undermined the oversight committee by not reporting complaints. Marcus sat in a crisis meeting with Dr. Hayes, the new COO, a black woman named Tasha Williams who'd been promoted from within, and his communications team. We've lost 3% market share in the past month, Sarah reported. Some customers are actively choosing competitors. Our social media mentions are 70% negative, and we're facing 5 separate lawsuits from employees claiming the new protocols violate their rights. Expected, Dr. Hayes said. Change always faces resistance. The question is whether we have the courage to persist. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from James Richardson. Board meeting in 1 hour. Several members expressing concern about stock price and public perception. Be prepared. An hour later, Marcus stood before the board of directors. The mood in the room was tense. Board member Patricia Morrison spoke first. Marcus, we supported your reforms. We believed they were necessary, but the financial impact is significant. We've lost over $1 billion in market value. Customers are angry. Employees are filing lawsuits. At what point do we acknowledge that the cure might be worse than the disease? Marcus had prepared for this moment. He clicked to his presentation. You're right that we've faced backlash, but let's look at the full picture. Yes, we've lost some customers, specifically customers who were comfortable with discrimination because it didn't affect them, but we've gained customers too. Bookings from passengers of color are up 18%. Corporate contracts from companies with strong DEI commitments are up 27%. He advanced to the next slide. Employee turnover among diverse staff is down 39%. We're attracting top talent who previously wouldn't consider working here. Applications to our pilot training program from women and people of color have increased by 64%. Another slide. Legal settlements for discrimination cases, 0 in the past 3 months, compared to an average of 3.7 million per month over the previous 5 years. We're saving money by preventing discrimination rather than paying people to stay quiet about it. And the lawsuits from employees. Another board member asked. 5 lawsuits from employees who object to body cameras and bias training, Marcus acknowledged. Compared to 42 lawsuits from passengers we discriminated against in the previous year. I'll take those odds. James Richardson leaned forward. What about the stock price? Down 12% from pre-incident levels, Marcus admitted. But the stock was artificially inflated because we were hiding $40 million in annual discrimination costs. We were saving money short-term by creating long-term liability. Now we're paying up front for prevention, which looks expensive until you compare it to the alternative. He pulled up a financial projection. Based on current trends, we'll recover the market value loss within 18 months, and we'll be better positioned for long-term growth because we've addressed systematic problems that would have eventually become catastrophic liabilities. Marcus paused, looking at each board member. But here's what matters more than money. We were hurting people. Every day on hundreds of flights we were treating passengers as less than human based on how they looked. We were creating a hostile work environment for employees of color. We were violating civil rights laws and covering it up with settlements. I became CEO to run an airline, not to be a civil rights activist, Patricia Morrison said. And while I respect what you're trying to do, I question whether this is the right role for a CEO. Then let me make this simple, Marcus replied. If you think a CEO's job is only to maximize short-term profit regardless of how we treat people, then you need a different CEO. I will not lead a company that profits from discrimination. I will not sacrifice human dignity for shareholder value. And if the board can't support that, I'll resign today and tell the world exactly why. The room went silent. Marcus had just put his job on the line. Either the board would support him, or he'd be gone. James Richardson stood up. All in favor of continuing full support for the Henderson protocols and CEO Henderson's leadership, raise your hand. Slowly, hands went up. 9 out of 12 board members. Not unanimous but enough. Motion carries, Richardson said. Marcus, you have our continued support. Patricia, David, Thomas, if you can't support this direction, we'll accept your resignations from the board with thanks for your service. The 3 dissenting members exchanged glances, then quietly gathered their materials and left. After the meeting, Richardson pulled Marcus aside. That was a hell of a gamble. It wasn't a gamble, Marcus said. It was a line in the sand. If the board wasn't willing to support doing the right thing, I didn't want to be CEO anyway. 6 months after the incident, the real work of transformation was grinding forward with painful slowness. Dr. Hayes had assembled a team of 15 diversity and inclusion specialists who were conducting audits of every department. The Oversight Committee, now chaired by Diana Park, the flight attendant who'd witnessed Marcus's assault, was receiving and investigating complaints with real authority to impose consequences. But implementation was messy. The body camera program had technical glitches, cameras that wouldn't charge, footage that didn't upload properly, storage systems that crashed. The bias training was meeting resistance from employees who felt it was confrontational or politically charged. The new complaint process was overwhelmed with reports, many of them legitimate concerns that had been suppressed for years, but some were false claims from employees trying to weaponize the system. Marcus spent his days putting out fires and addressing resistance. A crew based in Atlanta threatened a walkout over the Oversight Committee's authority. A pilots' union filed another lawsuit over bias training requirements. A group of conservative shareholders launched a proxy fight to remove Marcus from the CEO position. He was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep per night, losing weight from stress. His wife Patricia was worried about him. "You can't keep going like this," she said one night as he sat at their kitchen table reviewing another stack of reports at midnight. "You're going to burn out." "I can't slow down," Marcus replied. "Too many people are counting on this. If I show any weakness, the resistance wins. And if you collapse from exhaustion, how does that help anyone?" Marcus had no answer. He just knew he couldn't stop, not when there was so much left to fix. The next morning he got a call from Diana Park. "Mr. Henderson, we have a situation. A passenger filed a complaint, but it's complicated. Tell me." White male passenger claims he was discriminated against by a black flight attendant who was overly sensitive about a joke he made. He's threatening legal action and claiming the Henderson protocols are creating reverse discrimination. Marcus sighed. He'd been expecting this. What was the joke? He asked the flight attendant if she was related to Oprah. She told him that was inappropriate. He complained that she was being hostile and unprofessional. And the investigation, 3 witnesses confirm he made the comment. 2 say it was said in a joking tone. 1 says it felt racially charged. The flight attendant says this is the 5th time a passenger has made similar comments to her this month, and she's exhausted from having to smile through microaggressions. Marcus rubbed his temples. Recommendation: support the flight attendant. The comment was inappropriate regardless of intent, but the passenger is threatening to go to media claiming we're biased against white people. Let him, Marcus said. We're not going to punish an employee for calling out inappropriate behavior just because the passenger claims it was a joke. Document everything and prepare a statement. 9 months after the incident, Marcus stood in the Dallas training facility watching new flight attendants go through bias training. The program Dr. Hayes had designed was intensive, 3 full days instead of the previous 2-hour online module. It included role-playing exercises where participants experienced different forms of discrimination. It included testimony from passengers who'd been profiled or mistreated. It included hard conversations about bias and privilege and power. Marcus watched a young white male trainee struggle through a scenario where he played a Muslim passenger being questioned by security. "I don't understand why this is happening," the trainee said, staying in character. "I haven't done anything wrong." The trainer playing a security officer replied, "We just need to ask you a few questions. It's random selection, but you only stop me, not anyone else. Sir, if you don't cooperate, we'll need to call additional security." The scenario continued for several painful minutes, ending with the trainee's passenger missing his flight due to extended questioning that yielded nothing suspicious. When it ended, the trainee sat down, visibly shaken. "That was awful. I've never felt so powerless." "That's the point," the trainer said gently. "For many passengers, that's not a training exercise, that's reality. Every time they fly, they know they might be singled out. They know they might be questioned. They know they have to be twice as polite, twice as patient, twice as perfect just to be treated normally." "I never thought about it like that," the trainee admitted. "I fly all the time and nobody's ever questioned me." "Exactly," the trainer replied. "That's privilege. Not that you've done anything wrong, but that you've been assumed innocent. Other people don't get that assumption." Marcus watched several more scenarios, each one designed to build empathy and awareness. It wasn't perfect. Some trainees got defensive, some missed the point entirely, but it was progress. Real measurable progress. After the session, he met with Dr. Hayes in her office. "How are the numbers looking?" he asked. She pulled up her dashboard. Discrimination complaints are actually up 40% since we implemented the Henderson protocols. Marcus's heart sank. We're getting worse. No, Dr. Hayes said quickly. We're getting better at capturing what was always happening. Passengers feel safer reporting now because they believe something will actually be done. And the Oversight Committee is investigating properly instead of dismissing complaints. She clicked to another screen. But here's the more important metric. Substantiated discrimination incidents are down 62%. When we investigate, we're finding fewer cases of actual discrimination because employees know they'll face real consequences. What about employee satisfaction? Mixed. Support for the protocols breaks down along predictable lines. 91% of employees of color support them, 47% of white employees. But even among white employees, support is growing as people go through training and see the impact. Marcus nodded slowly. It's working. It's starting to work, Dr. Hayes corrected. We're 9 months in. Real culture change takes years. The question is whether we have the stamina to keep pushing when it would be easier to declare victory and move on. We keep pushing, Marcus said firmly. 1 year after, American Airlines released its annual Diversity and Inclusion Report. The data told a complex story of progress and ongoing challenges. Discrimination complaints down 68% from the peak 3 months after implementation. Employee diversity up at every level except senior leadership, which was still lagging. Customer satisfaction among passengers of color up 39%. Stock price recovered to pre-incident levels plus 7% growth. But there were failures too. 2 crew members had been caught disabling their body cameras and were fighting termination through their union. A regional manager in Houston had been fired for systematically dismissing complaints, and his replacement was struggling to rebuild trust. 3 passengers had filed lawsuits claiming the Oversight Committee was biased against white passengers. All 3 cases were dismissed, but they represented the ongoing resistance. Marcus stood at a company-wide virtual meeting, his face now familiar to every employee after a year of visibility. His photo was on the website, in break rooms, in training materials. He'd become the public face of change. 1 year ago today, I was assaulted on Flight 447, Marcus began, his voice steady. I was slapped across the face, called an animal, told to crawl. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. But it was also the catalyst for the most important work this company has ever done. He clicked to a slide showing key metrics. In the past year, we've trained over 80,000 employees in bias awareness. We've investigated over 1,500 discrimination complaints, and found that most were legitimate concerns that had been ignored for years. We've compensated passengers we'd wronged. We've fired employees who refused to change. We've rebuilt our complaint systems from the ground up. Another slide, but numbers don't tell the whole story. What matters is that we're building a culture where everyone, regardless of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or economic status, is treated with dignity. Where crew members know they'll be held accountable for discrimination. Where passengers trust that if something goes wrong, we'll actually do something about it. A question came through the chat from an employee in Chicago. Mr. Henderson, has it been worth it? The lawsuits, the boycotts, the resistance. Marcus paused, thinking about the past year, the exhaustion, the battles, the nights he'd wondered if he was destroying the company he'd worked so hard to build. Yes, he said finally, because we were hurting people. Every day we were causing real harm to real human beings. And no amount of profit, no stock price, no market share is worth that. We're an airline. Our job is to connect people, to bring them together, to make the world smaller. We can't do that if we're treating some people as less than human. He looked directly into the camera. The work isn't done. It will never be completely done. But we're better than we were a year ago, and we'll be better still a year from now. That's the commitment I'm making to you, to our passengers, and to myself. 3 years after the incident, Marcus stood before a congressional hearing on discrimination in transportation. The committee room was packed with press, advocates, airline executives, and members of the public. Senator Patricia Alvarez leaned into her microphone. Mr. Henderson, American Airlines has become a model for how companies can address systematic discrimination. Walk us through what you've accomplished since that day on Flight 447.
Marcus adjusted his tie and began. Senator, 3 years ago, I conducted my first and only undercover audit because data suggested we had a discrimination problem. Within minutes of boarding, I was profiled, interrogated, assaulted, and nearly arrested, all because a crew member decided that someone who looked like me didn't belong in first class. He pulled up a video on the large screen. The committee watched in silence as the assault played out, Brenda's hand connecting with Marcus's face, the boarding pass being torn, the slurs being shouted. This incident was live-streamed to over 100,000 viewers, Marcus continued. It became national news within hours, and it revealed what millions of people already knew, but that corporate America had spent decades denying. Discrimination is alive and well, operating in plain sight, protected by systems that prioritize procedure over justice. He clicked to the next slide. After the incident, we conducted a comprehensive audit. We found over 2,000 documented discrimination complaints in just 5 years, and those were only the incidents that were reported and recorded. The real number is certainly higher. Senator Thomas Breckinridge, known for his skepticism about discrimination claims, leaned forward. Mr. Henderson, couldn't many of these complaints be overreactions? People looking for discrimination where none exists. Marcus had anticipated this. Senator, we investigated every single complaint thoroughly. The Oversight Committee found that 87% were substantiated, meaning there was clear evidence of discriminatory treatment. These weren't overreactions. These were real incidents of passengers being profiled, harassed, or denied service based on their race, religion, or perceived economic status. He pulled out a folder. I'd like to enter into the record the stories of some of these passengers. Jennifer Washington, removed from first class for no reason. Ahmed Hassan, told to leave a flight because he was praying. Maria Rodriguez, accused of theft for using her own headphones. These aren't edge cases. This is what happens when we build systems that treat certain people as inherently suspicious. For the next 3 hours, Marcus presented data, shared passenger stories, and outlined the Henderson protocols. By the end, even Senator Breckinridge seemed moved. What you've done is remarkable, Senator Alvarez said, but has it worked? Has discrimination actually decreased? Marcus clicked to his final slide. Substantiated discrimination incidents are down 82% from pre-reform levels. Customer satisfaction among passengers of color has increased 51%. Employee diversity has improved at every level, and our stock price is up 34% from where it was before the incident, proving that doing the right thing is also good business. He paused. But more importantly, we've changed culture. Passengers of color tell us they feel safer flying with us. Employees of color tell us they feel valued and heard. That's success that can't be measured in stock prices or satisfaction scores. The hearing concluded with Senator Alvarez announcing legislation requiring all major airlines to implement protocols similar to American Airlines reforms. At night, Marcus received an unexpected email from Brenda Collins. Mr. Henderson, I know I have no right to contact you. I know that what I did was unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that I've spent the past 2 years in therapy, working to understand the prejudices I carried my whole life without recognizing them. I completed the court-ordered bias training. Then I voluntarily enrolled in more courses. I've been speaking at training sessions for other airlines, telling my story as a warning. I tell them what it cost me, my job, my reputation, my sense of myself as a good person. And I tell them what it cost you, your dignity, your safety, your peace. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your decision to make this public, to demand change, to refuse to let this be quietly swept away, it saved me from continuing to be the person I was. I was drowning in my own bias and didn't even know it. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be better. Thank you for giving me the chance to try. Brenda Collins. Marcus stared at the email for a long time. Then he forwarded it to Dr. Hayes with a note. Thoughts? Dr. Hayes replied within minutes. Redemption is possible. Not everyone who causes harm is beyond reach. But redemption requires genuine transformation, not just apology. Keep watching. If she means it, her actions over time will prove it. Marcus sent Brenda a brief reply. Keep doing the work. Transformation is a lifelong process, not a destination.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.